Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's Future of Tech event. My name is David Shepherd. I'm the Director of Trade and Investment at Leeds City Region Local Enterprise Partnership, and delighted to host this event where we'll be hearing from some of the world's fastest growing global technology businesses, many of which were established in China, including our sister city of Hangzhou, which is a hotbed for tech and where some of you will be aware we've been developing friendships for a number of years now. As we enter the most disruptive decade in human history, new technologies must be embraced and deployed at a far faster rate than previously possible. And many of the international tech firms represented here today are at the forefront of the global economic recovery as regions such as our own across the world look to transform the lives of their residents through new digital solutions. This event will showcase technologies which can benefit society and highlight the opportunities to businesses presented by international markets and tech collaborations. In the first session this morning, which will see us through to around 10 o'clock, you'll hear from Roger Marsh, Chair of Leeds City Region LEP, and see a fantastic overview from David Lloyd on the operations of the Alibaba Group. We'll then reconvene around 10:15 for the first of two panel sessions where our speakers will provide exciting insights into their activities, their strategies, mindsets, and display how their technology is impacting our lives on a daily basis. I'd just like to remind all the people watching the broadcast that you can submit questions via the online chat function, and we encourage you to do so. We'll have several short question and answer panel sessions throughout the morning. So let's get started straight away. And to do that, I'm going to invite our first guest to say a few words. Many of you will know Roger Marsh because over the past decade or so, he has devoted so much of his time to developing and representing our fabulous region overseas and here in the UK, and helping us to foster relationships and in some cases attract global leading tech businesses to our towns and cities. So Roger Marsh, Chair of Leeds City Region LEP, over to you.
Thank you, David, and good morning and welcome from me to this Leeds Digital Festival Future of Tech event, which I'm delighted to be giving some opening remarks to. And welcome to all our distinguished national and international speakers today, without whom we wouldn't be able to host such an event. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to make the opening remarks at a visual media conference for the creative sector, which from its humble origins about 7 years ago and some 30 people sitting around a room having a cup of coffee one morning and talking for an hour or so, has now developed into a global conference, the first time done virtually with over 500 participants over the day. At that conference, I've used often, but I think it's more prescient now than ever, the words of the former president, Abraham Lincoln, when he said the best way to predict the future is to go out and create it. The go out is my words added to it. So it's up to us to decide what the world should look like as we re-emerge from lockdown, plan and navigate the way ahead. Bring it more up to date and certainly more relevant to today's title of the Future of Tech. I was also struck by the words of the late Steve Jobs when he said, "It's more fun to be a pirate than join the Navy." Or in other words, thinking beyond the current boundaries of convention and approach is what we're all about. So under the heading of Tech for Good, as I'd like to call it, I want to cover three main themes. The importance of tech for society, the role of international tech corporations shaping the future for all of us, and actually should be shaping it with us and by us, not wholly to us, and we'll hear from distinguished speakers. And also I want to just touch on, in a completely non-political but purely economic and societal way, and reference the importance of the UK's relationship with China. And I'd like to start there. It goes without saying, but we should restate it. China is an important trading partner for the UK. 2019, some £100 billion of bilateral trade, and is our third largest trading partner. And in the circumstances we find ourselves as a nation, it's very important that we know who our economic friends are, and work to further those relationships. It's a huge market for us, and I myself, who made my first trip to China in early 2017, was struck by the fact the first thing I saw when I arrived in the arrivals hall of Shanghai Airport was a huge poster depicting the Burberry brand and its products, products that are made in our part of the world. The famous raincoat is only made in our part of the world, and goes all over the world, and very much sought after in China. So in reverse, we have improved our exports to China over the last decade, but importantly, the flip side is that the UK is one of the top destinations in Europe for Chinese investment, and we've experienced that in Leeds City Region, with a number of major businesses coming and developing their presence here. There's something like 800 Chinese businesses in the UK, mainly around the southeast, London, the southeast, and we're looking to change that. And certainly dialogue with our Consul General up here is about how do we continue to improve that. We know there's been some challenges, so intergovernmental challenges recently, but I think we need to step outside and be above all that, and that important that the strategic dialogue continues, and particularly when it comes to trade, investment, but importantly partnerships, meaningful, viable and long-term partnerships. And we are committed in the UK and certainly in Leeds City Region to continue that development. And indeed, I'm very much looking forward to when we're allowed to revisiting China in, perhaps it'll be early 2021. I referenced my recent visit to China and Hangzhou, and as I've said just before we came on air, I was struck, and I've been to many parts of the world, but to visit a country where you could taste, you could almost chew the economic momentum and vibrancy was quite intoxicating. Businesses like Hisense, Dahua Technologies, Keola, as we got to know them, but now part of Alibaba, and we're going to hear from David Lloyd shortly, and the importance of Hangzhou and in the fintech space, and maybe linking to our importance as Leeds City Region, which after London is second when it comes to financial professional services, important opportunities for the future. So turning to the businesses that are taking part today, they're all international tech businesses with significant operations, not only in the UK, but the US and Europe, and very much shaping the future. And as I said a few moments ago, it's helping them help us shape our future is actually very important. And as I've said, I'm really delighted that so many of them feel they're able to support today's event. One could say those companies, a number of whom are headquartered in China, are probably embracing tech faster than many others around the world. And as I said, a number of them are here already in the city region. But it's also important about some of the indigenous tech businesses that are embracing the wider world. And we will hear from TPP and Premier Farnell, two businesses headquartered in the city region, have been for a number of years, about how they're developing their partnerships. I was privileged recently to be asked by the Secretary of State for International Trade to join one of the trade advisory groups that's been set up, particularly the one in relation to investment, and actually investment both ways, but particularly inward investment into the north, which is very important to our future, but also developing those commercial relationships. And as I've said, I'm absolutely delighted that a number of those international businesses are part of today's event. I'm also very interested to hear about the experiences of other companies and how we can improve the relationship. But above all, a thanks from me to all of you, and let's use the opportunity, if not the difficulties of what we've all experienced, with a sense of realistic optimism. I don't subscribe to the "we're all doomed" scenario, but I do recognise we are in challenging waters, and we will together navigate our way through, I'm certain. Tech to society, it is changing all of our worlds. As a city region, we've been involved the last 2 years with MIT REAP in Boston. REAP is about how to transform your economy into a much more innovation-driven entrepreneurial economy from what it currently is. And I was struck by some of the advances in health tech. I was sat next to a lady at a dinner who's invented technology where somebody can be operated on in London, but the surgeon's in somewhere else in the world, and through the use of technology, a much better outcome can be achieved. We need to be much more data-driven. The importance of data has now eclipsed the importance of gold, diamonds, and precious minerals, so that we properly execute and improve the things that citizens want. And they want a better quality of life. They want to be included. And we need to use these smart technologies to provide better solutions. It's interesting, in the UK, we've often complained about the quality of our digital connectivity. Well, it's been put to the test and a half in the last 6 or 9 months, and despite some challenges, actually pretty good availability. What is interesting is how many people haven't got access to the internet, haven't got a laptop, and how do we make sure everybody gets the opportunity for that connectivity. So widespread adoption of tech based on communication solutions, e-health solutions, and the like are very important. So for me, today's event is about how do we shape that up? We know why. I think the importance is to be clear and agree on the what and the how, and importantly, how quickly. So in summary, as Abraham Lincoln said, let's not try and second guess it. Let's go create it. Let's not let somebody else decide what the shape of the future is. Let us determine it. And as Steve Jobs said, perhaps we need to conform, but maybe we also need to break some boundaries and break through some glass ceilings. I am confident of the future, but I also realize, and I'm realistic about the challenges. And as a famous playwright, George Bernard Shaw, said, we are not made wise by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility for the future. And for me, that's the future for us, everywhere in the world, but also for generations to come. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand back to you, David, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing other speakers. David.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for those insights. A great way to kick off. I think I'd just at this point like to say a little bit about the ambition of the Digital Festival to expand the international profile of the region. In some ways, going on online, hosting events virtually has enabled us to do that. And what we wanted to do was host an event as part of the festival that included the biggest technology firms in the world who are operating on a truly global footprint. And I'm pleased to say that not many organizations come bigger than the Alibaba Group. And we will hear now from David Lloyd, the General Manager of Alibaba Group for the UK, Netherlands and Nordics. And before David starts his presentation, I'd just like to give the audience a little bit of a flavour of the scale of Alibaba Group, one of the largest tech companies, one of the most valuable online retailers, with the value of merchandise purchased on its platform exceeding $1 trillion for the first time in the last financial year. And a staggering fact that I always remember from visiting Alibaba Group was that on Singles Day in 2019, they saw an incredible $38.4 billion worth of sales in a single day. That was an increase of 26% on 2018. And for an indication of scale, that's bigger than what Black Friday and Cyber Monday in the UK and US generate combined, with around 500,000 transactions per second, around 8 times more than what Visa would process on Black Friday. I've seen snippets of David's presentation. It's amazing. I'm now going to hand over to David. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. And thanks very much to Roger as well for hosting me today. It's a real pleasure to be here with you both and with everybody else in the audience. And I'm really glad, that this event is going ahead digitally. I think one of the last meetings I had before the world changed so thoroughly was in Leeds to discuss, how we might support an event like this. And so I'm really glad that even though I'm in the back room of my house, I'm still able to be with you here today. So I'm just going to share my presentation, and I'll trust people to message me furiously if you find yourselves unable to see it. So thanks for the warm welcome. As Roger and David said, I manage the business for Alibaba in pretty much all of the cold and wet countries in Europe. So yes, the UK, but also Netherlands, Nordics and Ireland. And what I want to spend a bit of time with you discussing here today is a bit about Alibaba, for those of you who don't know us very well, and then a bit about how we see the world in 2020. I think Roger talked about not needing to make everything doom and gloom and creating the future. And I really believe that. I think even though it's a very tough year, there's actually a lot of innovation, a lot of acceleration we've seen this year, which points us towards where we can go as businesses and how we can recover, and hopefully recover really quickly from what's been an incredibly difficult period. So very quickly, Alibaba, for those of you who don't know us, our mission is to make it easy to do business anywhere. And that is the same mission we've had for the last 21 years. We were founded in September 1999, so it was our 21st birthday just a week ago, which we managed to celebrate virtually. And that mission hasn't changed at all since the start of the organization. What has changed a bit is what that can mean for businesses, because what it meant back in 1999 was a real focus on helping businesses from all over the world to buy things from China. And we used Alibaba.com, a business-to-business platform, to help connect businesses all over the world with businesses in China. And at the time, that was really revolutionary, because while we had internet penetration in the UK of perhaps 15 to 20%, at that time, internet penetration in China was about 1%. So it was a really big step to say, I'm going to start an internet business, as Jack Ma did, that's going to change how companies can trade with each other, and particularly how they trade with China. What's happened, as Roger alluded to over the last 25 years really, is that China has changed dramatically. The population has moved from being a really quite impoverished population in parts to having an enormous middle class, to being the world's biggest retail market and one of the world's biggest consumer markets, second only to the US and soon to overtake. And what that meant for us is that when we talk about making it easy to do business anywhere, we're now not just talking about buying from China. We're talking about how do we help businesses all over the world sell to a really enormous and growing Chinese consumer base. And so to do that, what we've done is create this ecosystem. And I'm going to talk you through it at some pace. So we're not going to go through every single business, because otherwise we'd be here for more than 30 minutes. So to begin with, our core commerce businesses, and by core commerce, I'm really talking about e-commerce, so online buying and selling. Alibaba.com in the bottom right of that graphic was the original business, but the companies, the business units that really drive us today are those top three in China: Taobao, Tmall, and Tmall Global. For those of you who don't know them, Taobao and Tmall, they're very, very similar platforms. They're related platforms. But Taobao there's not really a great comparison in the West for Taobao, at least not digitally. So the way I would think about Taobao is a digital version of the biggest market that you can imagine. So if you imagine yourself in a kind of 1 million acre market selling shoes, clothes, fish, electronics, hats, anything you can imagine, that's Taobao. And at any one time, there are about 2 billion listings live on Taobao from large businesses right down to individual sellers, and mostly trading in China. Tmall, which is Taobao Mall, so a shopping mall, is like a very, very big, in fact, an infinitely large shopping mall. So the difference with Tmall is that you can find a lot of the same kinds of products, but what happens in Tmall is that we work with brands and businesses from all over the world to open a space within our shopping mall. And there are around 200,000 brands on Tmall selling. There's plenty of businesses from all over the world, hundreds, if not thousands of businesses from the UK already opening stores and running stores on Tmall. And it's a really, really big difference, I would say, between e-commerce in China and the e-commerce that we're used to here in the UK. So here in the UK, we probably shop on a brand's own website more often than not. So if you want to buy whatever you want to buy, there's a reasonable chance you'll go to Amazon, the largest player here. But there's also a reasonable chance that you will perhaps Google a product and then go through to a brand's own website, whether that's a retail website or a brand website. In China, people's expectation is not that they will go to a search engine and then find products and go to websites. Their expectation is that they'll come to Taobao or Tmall and that they'll be able to find whatever they want there. And what that means in real terms is that it is far more productive and far more effective to operate a store on Tmall than it is to operate your own website. And that means that we work with over 75 of the world's top 100 brands. It means that the primary route to market in China digitally for Apple or for Nike or for Burberry or for any of the world's top brands that you can think of is actually through their Tmall store and not through their own website, because Chinese consumers don't expect to go onto somebody's website and shop. They expect to come to our platforms or to our competitor platforms and to shop there. And then Tmall Global is the global part of that business. So it's the part of the business that really helps with cross-border e-commerce, helping brands from all over the world who don't have a presence in China to sell to China. So that's our core commerce business. And I want to pause there for a second and perhaps ask you to remember one statistic, which I think always does quite a good job of telling you perhaps the big difference between e-commerce in China and e-commerce here in the UK, or in fact in the West in general. And it's this, it's that the average user of Taobao, the average user, and we have over 800 million users coming to Taobao every month in China, but the average user comes to it 7 times every day. And every day they spend about 27 or 28 minutes per day on Taobao and on Tmall. And that's really important to understand, because if you think about the e-commerce platform that you visit the most here, and we're probably most of us thinking of the same one, it's a really useful platform. It's somewhere you would, clearly, you would shop there very often. But the idea that you would go there 7 times a day, every day, 49 times a week, spending nearly half an hour a day, every day there, is faintly ludicrous, right? But for Chinese consumers, this is how they're spending their time. They're going into these environments, going into Taobao, spending their time there. Yes, they're buying, but they're also researching products, watching videos, getting used to the products that are available on the platform, sharing things with friends. And it's a much more social and much more engaging commercial experience. So that's the real core of our business, and the part of our business that I tend to spend most of my time talking to international companies about. The second part of our business, which I can cover much more quickly, is our media and entertainment business. So we have UC Browser, the leading web browser in Asia. We have Alibaba Pictures, which has produced Oscar-winning films. And we have Youku. Youku is effectively the YouTube of China. So a platform full of user-generated content, but also very high-quality brand content and very high-quality dramas and TV content. So people go there for all kinds of different video reasons and spend a lot of time there. Great place to build your brand. And then finally, we have local services, which run from flight and hotel booking services through to restaurant booking services and food delivery services like Ele, which allows you to order your dinner but also to order a coffee to your desk if you're working too hard and you don't want to leave your desk. You can just go to Starbucks on Ultima and get a coffee delivered in 20 or 30 minutes. And the blue hippo that you see there is a business that we only launched about 3 years ago. It's called Hema, or as we call it, Fresh Hippo. And this is a largely fresh food-based supermarket, which I really think of as a supermarket of the future. And again, this is what I think Roger's alluding to when he says you can kind of smell or taste the growth in China. This is a supermarket that didn't exist 4 years ago, which now has over 200 different locations across China, and which allows you to shop in it like any supermarket. So you can go around with your supermarket, you use your mobile phone and scan goods as you pick them up, and then at the end you kind of scan the checkout and pay. So it's we have supermarkets in the UK doing this kind of thing. But what it also allows you to do is to do that exact same shop from home. So a week later, if you're sitting at home and you think, well, actually, I want exactly the same shop as I did last week, you can go into the Hema app, order those goods, and the moment you hit buy, somebody in your local store will walk around, pick the shopping off the shelves, take it around to the back of the store, give it to a delivery driver. And if you live within 3 kilometers of the store, you'll get the goods within half an hour, right? Which is just remarkable. Think about that as an experience for yourself. Could you, safely say that from the moment I started talking today to the moment I finished talking, you could have done a grocery order from your phone and had it delivered from your local Tesco, Waitrose, Aldi, whatever, right? That's the kind of experience that we are developing in China. So we play a really important role in the daily lives of Chinese consumers, have a lot of touch points with them, and create a lot of opportunities, I would say, for international brands to sell to those consumers. And what we've had to do to support that is then to create this backbone of commerce. So payments via Alipay. Alipay serves about 900 million Chinese consumers. It is a tool that really helps you live your daily life in China. To give you the example, I haven't actually been to China since December. It's I usually go sort of 8 to 10 times a year. But normally when I arrive in China, I would take out my phone, open up Alipay, go into the mini app within there for taxis, order a taxi from the airport, get that taxi to take me from the airport to the hotel, payments done automatically, go into the hotel, check into the hotel using Alipay, right? Not with anything else, but using Alipay to check into the hotel. Again, the bill can just be then done automatically. Walk to the campus where I'm going to go for my meetings, go into Starbucks, pay with Alipay. Everything's done through that app. So it's not just a payment app the way we have some payment apps here in the UK. It's a lifestyle app, and people are using it tens of times a day for everything. We have logistics in Xianyao to get goods around China, but also from overseas to China. We've opened a large logistics hub in Belgium in the last year, which is going to help more and more European brands to get their goods into China, out of China, and in fact, all over the world. We have Alibaba Cloud, our computing business, cloud computing business. All of our products are built on Alibaba Cloud because we need to have something incredibly robust to support a business of our scale. David mentioned in his introduction that on Singles Day, we process 500,000 transactions a second at our peak. Sometimes we talk about these numbers, it's worth pausing and thinking that's 1 million transactions every 2 seconds. For those of you who run your own e-commerce sites, you'll know what an extraordinary volume that is to be delivering every 2 seconds. So we need a platform that is more robust than we would want to rely on anyone else to deliver, so we rely on ourselves. We now take that platform and take it out to other businesses. And I'm really pleased to say that even during the pandemic, as an example of how organizations can innovate, we've worked with Sheffield University, we've worked with UCL in London as well, and we're supporting those universities to connect to Chinese students while they're still in China to make sure they can continue their learning, even if they're not here physically. And then Alimama, our data management and marketing platform. Again, Roger mentioned data as being so incredibly more valuable than gold, diamonds, etc. We couldn't agree more. And if I come back to what I asked you to remember, that our average user visits us 7 times a day on Taobao, spends nearly half an hour a day with us. If you think about that for a moment, that is a lot of really valuable data that brands can use, first of all, to market their products better, right? Because if you don't market your products better and market your products using data on a platform like this, your products could get lost. but also to create new products. So we worked with businesses like Mars to use that data and to create spicy Snickers, a brand of Snickers. Some of you might think it sounds not very nice. I actually really like it. It's a very spicy Szechuan pepper flavored Snickers bar designed just for the Chinese market, using data from our platform. We've worked with L'Oreal to create very specific skincare products just for Chinese consumers using that data. And so it's incredibly rich, incredibly powerful data that helps businesses to succeed in China. And what all of that ecosystem does is to drive some of those big numbers that David actually mentioned in his introductions. We have 960 million buyers on our platforms globally. It's just under 900 million in China alone. We transact over $1 trillion of GMV, did over 38.4 billion in one day on Singles Day last year. This is not our revenue, right? This is not Alibaba's revenue. This is the revenue of brands who operate on our platform. And I take you back to that first mission statement I gave you to make it easy to do business anywhere. All of these large numbers are based on connecting your businesses and businesses like yours to consumers, first of all in China, but increasingly around the world. And so this is the revenue of businesses like yours. And the company's ambition is to serve 10 million profitable SMEs globally on our platforms, to have them connecting to consumers, to over 2 billion consumers globally, and really being profitable and using the power of the web, and hopefully using the power of some of the platforms we've built. And a couple of things I would just mention before I go away from the big numbers is growth. And that's really important. As David mentioned, that's a big number, right? 38.4 billion in a day, more than Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the 2 days in between combined in all of the US, all of it. But I think what is really spectacular about that is that from a high base, in a market which is already comfortably the world's biggest e-commerce market, by the way, it's about 50% of the world's e-commerce is in China. Last year, that grew 26%. Right, 26% off an incredibly high base already. So it's not just a scale opportunity, it's a growth opportunity. And the final thing I would say about that, and this is less about the web and less about Alibaba and more about China, is that when we're thinking about growth, we have to look at new markets. We have to look to China and to Asia, as well as the more traditional markets we might look to export to. And the reason for that is that the growth there is absolutely staggering. China in the last 3 years has probably grown its economy overall by the same amount as the entire volume of the UK economy. So it's already pretty big, but in 3 years, it basically bolted on the entire UK economy to its own. And it's going to do that again in the next 4 to 5 years, I would guess. So it's a pretty extraordinary growth story that's happening there. And if you're not paying attention to it, then you're missing potentially a really large opportunity. So having introduced Alibaba, I want to spend a bit of time talking about how we see the world in 2020 and where we see opportunities. And Roger talked a lot about this in his introduction. It's a difficult year. We know it's a very difficult year for many of the companies we work with. We hear probably if you're like me, you wake up most days and you hear pretty bad news stories, actually. But what I would say is that as we move through this year, what can really help us grow is going to be digital. What can really help us grow is this extraordinary movement to digital platforms. And the reason I say that is because we're all spending an enormous amount more time online, right? We're all doing things that we were already doing, but just doing them more. If I think about myself, I probably did an online grocery shop once every month or two. Now I do one every week, right? If I think about my viewing behaviors, I used to go to the cinema a lot, to the theater quite often. Now, obviously that's not an option. So I'm watching more things online, and I hope I can return to some of my previous behaviors. But actually, I think what's going to happen is that some of those behaviors that we've embedded this year are going to stay with us. And what those behaviors are not brand new. They're accelerations. And what I want to show you is that some of that acceleration has been happening in China actually over the last 20 years. So I want to show you a quick video to try and visualize that quickly. And actually, I'm just going to go to that and then I'm going to come back. So hopefully you're going to be able to hear this. So I'm not sure if you can hear that video. It's phenomenally loud in my headphones. If you didn't hear it, it's got very stirring music, which is very good for a wet Tuesday morning. But what it shows you is that there's been this absolutely extraordinary growth in China in the last 25 to 30 years, where people are genuinely coming out of poverty. Right around the time I was born, about 60% of the Chinese population lived on probably about $1 a day. Today, there's a middle class which is several hundred million strong, and it's going to grow by several hundred million more over the next 10 years. What's happened is that a country that had actually fewer internet users than the UK probably back in 1999 has now got nearly 1 billion internet users, and it's become an incredibly digital society where people have leapfrogged some of the experiences we have here in the West and are digital first. What it means for us as businesses here in the UK is that we can look at China, yes, as a growth opportunity, yes, as a scale opportunity, but also somewhere where we can learn about what our future could look like in terms of how we can grow our businesses and how we can be digital. So I'm going to quickly go back and, if possible, and I may just have to escape. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to just end the presentation quickly and then. Well, I think I'm not going to be able to go back. I'm sorry for that. So I think I've managed to lose the ability to go back in my presentation. But what I wanted to tell you about was some British businesses who I think are doing a really good job of this, from the very large to the much smaller. And those include people like Harrods, for example. So you'd have seen me skip through Harrods very quickly. Harrods doesn't have a huge presence in China, but the one thing that they do tell us is that they take about £25, maybe £26 out of every 100 that Chinese people spend on retail in London. Right, so every time Chinese people come to London, about a quarter of their spend just happens in Harrods. So what we've done is to work with Harrods to enable them to accept Alipay, so that when Chinese people go to their store, they're able to pay the way they want to pay, and we're actually able to help them with tax refunds. But what we've also been able to do is to work with Alipay, which, as I mentioned, is a lifestyle app, not just a payment app, to market to those people when they arrive in the UK and say, hey, you should go to Harrods because they accept Alipay, because they have offers for you, because it's a great place for you to shop as tourists. And we're doing that now with thousands upon thousands of other merchants around the UK. And there's plenty of stores in Leeds today that accept Alipay from students when they're there, but also from Chinese tourists who visit the region. Another example is Manchester United. So apologies for anyone who's offended by that as an example, but I'm hoping we can do something similar with Leeds in the future. Man United, probably in terms of their fan volume, still the largest football club in the world. They came to us a couple of years ago and said, hey, we'd really like to build our partnership in China, but we want it to be not just about selling things. We really want to connect with fans. So what have we done? Well, first of all, we became the exclusive content partner for video with Youku. So training matches, pre-season matches, exclusive content and clips with players, all of this kind of content and interviews is now on Youku in China. So Youku has become the home of Manchester United video content. What we've also been able to do then is to say, well, let's link from that Youku video onto the Adidas store on Tmall, so that people who've just watched the video can then go and buy the official kit. And what we've done this year is to open up for the Manchester United megastore at Old Trafford, Alipay. So now when Chinese consumers visit the UK, which is obviously not happening very much right now, but when they visit the UK, they're able to go to Man United, go to Old Trafford, and again, get marketed to, get the opportunity to have a unique experience at Old Trafford and then pay using Alipay. So we're doing this with some really large companies, but what we're also doing is enabling huge numbers of SMEs to be successful as well. And so, yes, there's large companies like Burberry, GHD, the Hut Group, and other businesses, with great operations in Yorkshire and around the region. But there's also companies who probably many of you haven't heard of, and the favorite that I often talk about is a business from South Wales called Smoothskin, who are a laser hair removal product, pretty high end. It's probably £200 to £300 device, mostly used by kind of beauty conscious, fashion conscious young women, which I'd never heard of until they started selling some goods on our platform. We found out that they were becoming really popular, built a closer partnership together with Smoothskin, based just outside Swansea. And what happened over the next 2 years, in fact, next 3 years, is pretty dramatic, whereby China went from being an idea in their mind to being not just their biggest market, but over half of their global sales. The vast majority of those sales are taking place on our platform. In terms of what that's done to their business, they went from operating one site, one factory in Swansea, to having to massively increase capacity, in fact, more than double capacity, and open a factory on an adjacent site in Wales. They have tripled, maybe even quadrupled their headcount. But pretty much all of that business transformation for them has come from one conversation where we talked about, well, how can we try and make you ambitiously perhaps the most popular laser hair removal product in China? And we're pretty far along the track of doing that. And that's the ambition that I have for British businesses, really of any size. So, we're doing this with lots of British companies. We're doing it in a fast growing market. There's a huge growth opportunity. And so I just want to spend perhaps the last 5 minutes talking to you about what I think we need to be doing, in the midst of what is a really difficult period, in the midst of, genuinely challenging times for business, where the UK market, we know in the second quarter, it had an incredibly difficult quarter. We're seeing, we think, a return to some growth now, but we need to find more growth. But what can you do to try to bounce back quickly, and what can you do to try and bounce back digitally? Well, the first thing is, I think you need to create richer online experiences. And I say that, it sounds perhaps a little obvious, but I say it because we were already, forget 2020, we were already online far more every year. But this year has seen a step change that I think we're not going to return from. And that step change, for example, in China, looks like people going from spending 5 hours a day online to spending 7 hours a day online. For me, it means, spending a lot of time in this room, a lot of time doing Zoom and other video calls. But again, spending pretty much my entire life online. What that means for brands, what that means for businesses is you have to create better online experiences, because people are going to spend more time with you online, perhaps, than they do offline. So you can't just have a kind of nice, efficient web store anymore. You actually need to create richer, more immersive, more engaging content, because if you don't do that, consumers are going to go to the people who do that for them. The second thing, you need to bring the world to your customers. So, I talked about Chinese tourists going to Harrods, going to the British Museum, going to Old Trafford. Hopefully they'll go to Ellen Road. Right now they can't do that, right? They're not traveling to Europe. They're not doing that. So what can we do? We need to bring the world to our consumers. We need to find new ways to say, well, the things that you were doing before, going to tourist locations, going to stores, we're going to bring to you digitally. And then finally, which I've just talked about quite a lot already, is follow the growth, and really have an expansive mindset for growth. Of course, we have to manage the core of our businesses. Of course, we have to manage through what is a really difficult crisis. But we also really need to follow the growth of businesses. We have to say, well, where is there potentially transformational growth for my business, and how can I go after that growth? And so I'm going to just give you some very quick examples of that. So how do you create richer online experiences? Well, this is how we do it in China. And there's another quick video here of live streaming.
Hello， 大家好，我是李佳霞。那我们今天的口红直播要开始喽。我是口红一哥，我是口红大哥。今天给大家推荐一款国产。那今天要给大家来推荐到的一支口红呢，是来自于我手上的这一支。首先我在我的手臂上给大家试一下颜色，它的顺滑度非常非常，我自己看的越看越舒服。大家记得买哦。挑战失败。
So this was a bit of fun we had last year, where the guy on the left is a very, very famous and popular live streamer who can show thousands of lipsticks to consumers in a day. Live streaming, he's basically been constantly videoed, trying on different lipsticks, trying on different perhaps kinds of makeup, showing them to consumers, saying what he likes, what he doesn't like, and then helping brands to sell them really directly. The guy here on the screen, for those of you who don't know him, is Jack Ma. Ma Yun, our founder, who created the business back in 1999, who's less good, apparently, at selling lipsticks online. A few years ago, this was something we were trying out and trying to make successful, this idea of live streaming. Today it is core to everything we do because people are spending more time online, because they want more engaging experiences. We're spending a lot of time with brands and a lot of times with these kinds of key opinion leaders or these live streamers creating this kind of content. And to give you an idea of the scale of it, so Smooth Skin, the brand I mentioned, have done several live streams already, and they can sell thousands of units in a 15-minute live stream. And when you think that those units, when you think one of those products is probably over £200, that's an extraordinary volume for them to be putting through in a very, very short space of time. What it means is that in 15 minutes, they're potentially doing more revenue in China than perhaps they were doing in a month, maybe even in a year, a few years previously. It's a pretty extraordinary transformation to take place when you commercialize entertainment. And that's what we're really doing there, is making entertaining content and commercializing it. Unilever last year, to talk about the mainstream of this, Unilever worked with over 100 different live streamers for Singles Day, for Double 11, our big shopping promotion last year. So this is really mainstream now. So it's gone from a kind of fun, nice to have thing to a, you must do this if you want to connect with Chinese consumers. And we can give lots of advice about how you do it. So how do you bring the world to your customers? Well, I want to give you two quick examples. This is from Ikea. Ikea we've been talking to for a long time. Ikea is, an extraordinary business in that they really, as a retailer and a brand, control the end-to-end brand experience totally. So, you largely only find their products in their own stores and on their own website. They like to take you to their big out-of-town stores and have you walk around them. And when you're experiencing that kind of IKEA brand, it's a very, very particular experience. So what we talked to them about is, well, how do we create that experience online? And what they did, and this is just a tiny snapshot of it, was to say, well, why don't we use augmented reality to bring our entire Shanghai store into our Tmall, our Alibaba store. So now when you go into the IKEA web store on Tmall, you can basically walk around the Shanghai IKEA store if you want to and have that very, very traditional IKEA experience, but online. So you can bring the world to your customers, and more brands are investigating how can you use AR to do that. From a tourist perspective, here's something we did with the British Museum again. So Chinese tourists in the UK, the first place they tend to visit is Buckingham Palace. The second place is the British Museum. The third place is Bicester Shopping Village. So for the British Museum, this was it's a big loss, just as is for so many companies when Chinese consumers and tourists from all over the world don't show up. So what we did is we worked with the British Museum to live stream a tour of the British Museum, viewed millions and millions of times by Chinese consumers, able to walk around the British Museum. And again, we can link off from this live stream to the British Museum shop. So you can kind of exit through the gift shop digitally and not just online. And then finally, and this is my final message for all of you, follow the growth. And I really think about this a lot, and it's what I spend a lot of my time talking about, which is, in 2020, it can definitely feel like the world got smaller as we left our houses much less. I leave this room probably only about 3 times a day to get a coffee and get some lunch. We don't really see the world the way we used to, right? We don't really get out in the world as much as we used to. By this time in a normal year, I probably would have been to China 6 or 7 times. Would have been all over Europe. I definitely would have spent quite a bit of time in Leeds, and yet I've barely left London in 9 months. So the world can start to feel smaller, and I think that can then play on our mindset when we're challenged to say, well, where should I be spending my time? And we start to think, much more narrowly. And what I would encourage all of you to do is to remember that despite the current challenges, and to remember that despite the kind of narrowness, perhaps, of our vision today, that actually it's never been easier to sell goods overseas. It's never been easier to export than it is today, right? And it's going to get easier. We're going to make it easier. Other businesses are going to make it easier. And for sure, it's never been easier for a British company, for a company from Leeds or from West Yorkshire to do business with China, because that did used to be hard. It's still not that easy, but that did used to be very, very difficult. And there's this tyranny of distance, which we all feel like we would have to overcome, but it's getting easier and easier. And the growth is there, right? The growth is there for businesses like yours to go after. And when I say the growth is there, I mean this. I mean, it is the world's largest retail market, worth over $5 trillion. The China retail market is bigger than the entire UK economy by quite some distance, actually, and growing quickly. It's going to become the world's biggest consumer market this year or next. But for businesses from overseas, the taste for imported goods, the desire for goods from overseas has never been higher, right? And I share this statistic with you. It's not even that crazy from our perspective, 40% year-over-year growth, but I share it with you for one reason. And that's because this is, you know, during the pandemic, when the pandemic was still going on in China quite seriously, imported goods sales on Tmall Global still grew at over 40% year-over-year. So even when it was more difficult than it had been to get goods into China, when there were more restrictions in place, when it was more difficult to get goods around China, Chinese consumers were still buying 40% more goods during the pandemic from overseas than they were a year previous. So you can only imagine what that will look like when it's easier to get goods into China again, when it's easier to get goods around China. So there is explosive growth available for businesses like yours, and we really want to help you reach it, and we want to make it as easy as possible, because it's not just for the largest companies in the world anymore. And this is the last thing I would say. You know, of course, for large businesses, they'll still do really well with this. But globalization, the ability to export, to import from all over the world is for all businesses now. And we want it to be for 10 million SMEs. And that's what we're really, really focused on doing. So that's the end of my presentation. And sorry for my personal tech error in the middle of it, but I hope it got across to you how big an opportunity we think there is. And I think now I have a bit of time for questions. So perhaps I'm going to stop my screen share.
Thank you, David. An amazing presentation there, and I suppose there are so many aspects of it that we could discuss in more detail. But the questions are coming in, and I invite viewers to carry on sending the questions in, and I'll field them to David, who's kindly agreed to hang around and answer some of them. One theme I want to start with, David, in the questions is to follow the growth, and I think one of the comments you made is if you're not paying attention to it, you'll miss it. And as the Director of Trade and Investment in Leeds City Region, one of our biggest challenges is encouraging businesses to access new markets. We have a situation where 56% of the goods that we sell go to Europe. As the transition period soon ends, we're challenging businesses to look at non-EU markets. And the North overall has an objective to get in line with the UK. And by 2030, we want 30% of our GDP to be coming from export activity. And we think that needs a transformational shift in the volume of businesses selling overseas, around 12,000 new exporters. And as Alibaba, the kind of guardian of, Chinese marketplace, the portal into China, how can we work together to crack it? How can we work with you effectively to start to encourage businesses to sell into China and to see the Chinese market as something that they should be paying attention to?
It's a good question. It's pretty much a large part of my job and the team's job here in the UK to help businesses to do that. The first thing I might just say, by the way, is that China itself is a huge opportunity. For those businesses we've already, I think, done a good job of helping them to enter China. We're now talking about completely different markets as well. So we operate the leading e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia as well, Lazada. And so you can think even more expansively than just China and look at some of the other growth markets in Asia as well. We're operating platforms in Turkey, across Europe as well. So we're really trying to support that global export, even though we talk about China a lot, because that's where so much of that growth is. So how can you do it? Well, first of all, obviously events like this, we're always really happy to talk to businesses from the region. It's easier for us to do it at scale. So I'll probably try and work with you after this, David, and all of your colleagues to say, well, how do we speak to more businesses at some scale to give them a sense of the opportunity? The second, I think there's a demystification job to do, whereby the world's two biggest economies, right? US and China. You look at the US, speak the same language as us. We have a lot of cultural similarities. We watch the same TV, same films, et cetera, right? We're all kind of pretty aware of what goes on in the US. So despite the fact that it's quite far away, and the West Coast in particular is pretty far away, we just feel close, right? We feel culturally close, and we feel like we have an understanding. China, I don't think people feel that. Right? There's huge linguistic differences. There's cultural differences. There's the fact that, how many people on this call, would sit down and watch a Chinese drama, right? It just wouldn't happen. But all of us will have watched some US TV or films in the last week, probably. So there's a big gap there. And I think what we can do together is try and demystify that and say, well, don't worry about all of that stuff. First of all, it's easier than it's ever been, right? Yes, it's far away, but there are free ports all around China. It doesn't matter if you're registered in China or not registered in China. There are options for you to sell in. You can create a store on Tmall, or you can sell via Kaola, which you mentioned at the start, David, I think, or perhaps Roger, and via our Tmall overseas fulfillment. We have an array of options for the smallest companies to maybe just send us 10 products and see what sells, right through to the biggest companies to set up operations in China. So we need to demystify it a bit. Second thing I think we do need to do is then to educate people on what it takes to succeed. And so a really good example is, from my perspective at least, if you want to start exporting around Europe or the US, you could frankly just think about doing a bit of marketplace activity, maybe translate your website, maybe do a bit of Google marketing to drive people to your website, and then jobs are good, and then you start to build up. China is a bit harder, and it's harder because of the cultural differences, because of the platform differences. And so what I think we have to do is to say, for example, if you really want to launch your brand, do a live stream. Right? You don't really have to do that in Europe. So there's differences, but it's probably for people like you and me and our colleagues to educate businesses at as much scale as possible. Yeah.
In fact, you've answered a few of the questions that are coming in. One question we received was, where in a kind of where we're increasingly working online in a market such as China, where personal relationships are so important, does it make it more difficult? And other questions, if I look at them, seem to be around the theme of, here's a good one, David. Do you find it hard to get people to understand the scale and sophistications of your operations and the Chinese market?
So I think not the scale. I think people get it. I think the problem with the scale actually is it can be a bit blinding. So people either become a bit numb to the big numbers, or they think, well, where could I fit in there? Think about that. Think about that business Smooth Skin from Wales, which is not a large company. Imagine if they'd have said to themselves, "Oh, maybe I can't do that because it's too big." Well, actually, what they found out is that they could multiply their revenues and multiply their profit and completely transform their business by finding a niche. Actually, by finding a niche. So scale, I think you have to think about niche, and there are lots of niche opportunities, and a niche in China could be bigger than your British business, frankly, right? If you find the right niche. Second, I just want to talk about sophistication. Yes. And I genuinely do think, here's the thing, the UK is the world's most digital market by some measures. We spend more per capita online per person than anyone else in the world. So we can feel like we're super advanced. Helping people to understand that actually what's happened in China and what may happen in some other Asian markets is they've leapfrogged us. Because they didn't have existing good experiences, they went from really bad experiences to great experiences. That can be quite hard to understand. I'll just give you a really quick example, David, which is payment. We all had credit cards and debit cards. We all could pay for things contactlessly, right? So mobile payment and all of the richness that you can get from mobile payment hasn't really taken off here. Not really, because we're like, well, maybe I don't need to because I've got a credit card. I can just wave at a terminal. But what that means is that Chinese consumers who didn't have credit cards, who didn't have credit histories, they've jumped straight into the future. And I think showing British businesses that can be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I just kind of go back to one of Roger's observations in his welcoming remarks around it being almost like you need to see it to believe it, and visiting China. A lot of people have not visited China and seen it at first hand, and it always seems very difficult for an organization like that, the LEP, to be able to push that experience out into the businesses and to get them to understand it. Our universities have huge and long-lasting collaborations and friendships, and I think the universities can play a role as a portal for assisting businesses to understand China. Roger, can I bring you in? Obviously, that's the first time you'll have seen the Alibaba Group presentation. Have you got any remarks or comments around the capabilities in Leeds City Region that can play into the Chinese market and the trends?
I think you made some important points, but first of all, can I thank you, David? That was a really fascinating exposition, albeit at some pace, of the opportunity. And I think it's about, I think there's a job for us to do, and perhaps somebody like you really can help us reassure businesses that actually the risks they might perceive are relatively small in reality, rather than in their belief of stepping into the Chinese market, and the opportunities, as you just said about that business in Wales, to transform from something that's single figures of millions a year to triple, if not more, figures of millions a year. So I think there is a job to be done. I don't think there's anything you can do better than going and visiting and seeing and sensing it, but recognizing it's one hell of a big country, and you need to focus where the relationships are. And I think we focused on Hangzhou because of that long civic and education relationship that we've developed into the third bit, which is the economic, because it suits both parties. I think, thirdly, you're right, David Shepherd, the number of international students. If I think about the University of Leeds just as one of the 7 institutions in our region, they have in excess of 2,500 alumni in Shanghai alone. I don't know how many it is right across the whole country. The economic effect of those students when they're here, particularly in the high-end luxury products, not least of which expensive Swiss watches, is quite phenomenal to our part of the world. Just Deputy Vice Chancellor International for the University of Leeds is Chinese himself, Professor Hai Sui Yu, but that's true of all of the universities, and they have different relationships. And it's, I think, the job for us, David Shepherd, is to try and ensure that we knit together all those relationships so that they are to mutual advantage, with our friends and businesses in China, beyond all of the sort of background or otherwise. And hence, a mission we hopefully will host next year, we may be able to take. And here's a challenge. Could we find 50 businesses? Could 50 businesses say it's worth our while to join the Leeds City Region Silk Road to China and go see for themselves? And can we work with somebody like you, David, and others on this call for them to see the reality of the opportunity rather than be perhaps daunted by the risks of it?
Well, if it's anything, according to we got an amazing response to the previous drive we did around Kaola.com and NetEase, who've since been acquired by the Alibaba Group. And what that really did was serve to provide the opportunity to businesses, and they came forward in numbers, and maybe, David, not only today have you provided us with a fabulous understanding, a much deeper understanding of Alibaba Group, but an opportunity in terms of working with you going forward, and we will snap your hand off on that, and after this call have a conversation around how can we do something of scale that makes it easy for you to work with us, but more so makes it easier for businesses to see the opportunities that the Chinese market presents.
I think, David, if I may just come in, I do like your line, follow the growth. I think it's actually follow, but be part of it, rather than just watch others be part of it. Get on the train rather than wonder where it's going.
No, I really agree, and I think the reason we talk about it is when it's a really tough moment right now, right? It's just the reality, and we're really aware it's a really tough moment right now. So I think just looking where there's growth and saying, how do I get on board with that is really important. And then David and Roger, we a big part of my role is to support British businesses to export more, right? I think frankly, I have a perspective on this, working with all of the different countries around the world where Alibaba has a presence. One of the things I often think is the UK should be a bit better at exporting generally.
Yeah.
And we can be a big part of helping the UK export to China, to Asia, around the world. And I really want us to focus on that. So I'm always happy to work with people who are happy to work with us.
I think, David, we've got to keep reminding ourselves, not only as a nation, but particularly the North. It's in our DNA. We just seem to have lost sight of it. We were the global pioneers. I'm proud to say where I come from in the Northeast, Captain Cook was born. I mean, these are the people that created what we now call global. That was just about exploration. I don't mean that in any sort of silly way. And I think we've just got to keep reminding ourselves, we've done this. Not that are we capable of it. We've done it. What the challenge is, can we really seize the moment? Are we sufficiently confident and believe in the words carpe diem? Because that's kind of where I think we should be. And that's where realistic optimism comes in, despite all the challenges. And do you know what? I think we owe it to the kids and grandkids of the future. But that's me being a bit preachy on a Tuesday morning. But I think that's what the real prize is, their futures and our enjoyment in shaping them. Okay,
thank you, Roger. And on that challenge, I think we'll bring the first session of the event to an end. Thank you very much, Roger and David, for getting the event off to a very good start. I'm sure the viewers have found it very interesting. Well, we have actually gone in a little bit to the comfort break because I wanted that opportunity for questions and answers to David and Roger. And I can see that some of the panelists for the next session have joined us. So what we will do is have a 5-minute comfort break now, if that's okay. I ask people not to ring off and try ring back on again, but just to mute and stop video. And we'll reconvene at 10:15 for the first of this morning's panel sessions, which will delve a bit deeper into the future of tech and speak to some more representatives from equally as exciting businesses. Thank you. We'll reconvene at 10:15.